That was the nightmare Isabel faced one late afternoon. Stopped by two local police officers for no reason other than the color of her skin and her expensive car. They didn't stop there. They looked at her with contemptuous, scrutinizing eyes. And then, the disgusting suggestion was made, bribe them or you'll get into trouble. A blatant blackmail by those who abuse their power. When Isabel, a strong and upright woman, flatly refused, hell broke loose. The most vicious racial and sexist slurs were thrown at her. And then they handcuffed her, dragged her out of the car, and treated her like a criminal. Illegally arrested, publicly humiliated by the very people whose duty it is to protect. But these two arrogant, greedy, prejudiced policemen made an unthinkable mistake. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea how powerful a position the black woman sitting handcuffed in the back seat of the patrol car held. When the truth is revealed at the police station, when her true identity is revealed, how will the two men who were just so aggressive react? How will they kneel and beg? And what will be the final price they pay for their racist and corrupt actions? The number will shock you. Prepare yourself for a story of prejudice, extreme abuse of power, and a dramatic turnaround, one you have to hear to believe. The late afternoon sun cast a brilliant orange silk over the western sky, glinting off the shiny black paint of the Mercedes S-Class as it glided along the smooth asphalt. The road wound gracefully through an affluent suburb, lined with ancient oak trees and luxurious villas nestled behind carefully tended gardens. The scene was picturesque, peaceful, and quiet, with only the occasional car passing by. Behind the wheel sat Isabel Sterling, a black woman in her 40s. Her appearance exuded quiet authority, intelligence, and confidence. Even though she was only wearing an elegant business suit after a long day at work, it was easy to recognize the aura of someone in a high-ranking leadership position. Her eyes were sharp, but now somewhat relaxed as she drove the car smoothly, classical music softly playing from the high-end Bose sound system. She was on her way home from a stressful meeting at the regional headquarters of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, where she served as deputy director. A position that required steely will, superior intelligence, and unwavering dedication. This rare moment of peace on the way home was a precious balm. But that peace was suddenly broken. Red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror, accompanied by a short, sharp siren. Isabel glanced in the mirror. A local police cruiser was following closely behind and signaling her to pull over. She frowned, wondering what she had done wrong. With the experience and caution of a law enforcement officer, she was certain she had not been speeding or doing anything blatantly wrong. Still, she slowed down, turned on her signal, and slowly pulled over to the side of the road safely. She turned off the music, rolled down the driver's side window halfway, and waited. The old patrol car stopped a few meters away. The door opened, and two policemen got out. The one in front was older, about 50, a bit stocky, his face showing fatigue and a certain inherent dissatisfaction. It was Officer Ray Kowski. His eyes were sharp, quickly scanning the luxurious Mercedes before stopping at the black woman behind the wheel, a barely perceptible smirk flashing across his lips. Behind him was Officer Mark Jenkins, much younger, probably in his early 30s, somewhat energetic in appearance but also wild and excitable. As he stopped Isabel's car, Kowski whispered to Jenkins, his voice full of meaning, "Look, Mark, a black woman driving a car like that. Something's definitely wrong, just getting a little tip at the end of the day." Jenkins just sneered, agreeing. It was a sick thought, a deep-rooted prejudice that black people couldn't be rich legally, and agreed to use power for illicit gain. Kowski walked toward Isabel's car door, his gait somewhat heavy. Jenkins stood back, his hand on his gun belt, his eyes scanning the car with a questioning look. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Kowski said, his tone trying to sound professional but lacking basic respect. "You're going a bit too fast for this stretch of road." He was vague, offering a clearly fabricated reason for stopping. Isabel looked Kowski straight in the eye, her voice calm and clear. "Hello, officer. I believe I was keeping within the speed limit. Any particular problems?" She knew she wasn't going fast, and she knew where this game was headed. Officer Kowski seemed unconcerned by Isabel's answer. He maintained his cold, somewhat condescending expression. "Please show me your driver's license and vehicle registration." Isabel quietly opened her purse and the car's glove compartment, took out her driver's license and the necessary papers, and handed them to Kowski. She did everything slowly and deliberately, her eyes never leaving the policeman, taking in every expression and every little gesture. Decades of experience dealing with all kinds of criminals and complex situations had taught her how to read people and stay calm under pressure. Kowski took the papers, glanced at the photo on the license, then back at Isabel, his eyes lingering on her elegant dress and the delicate watch on her wrist. He flipped the registration over and over, as if searching for something suspicious. "Isabel Sterling," he said the name aloud, then looked inside the luxury car. "Nice car. Must be expensive." His tone turned rudely curious. "What do you do for a living to be able to drive such a luxury car?" The question was completely unrelated to the reason for the initial stop. Isabel felt her irritation rising, but kept her voice even. "Officer, my profession has nothing to do with your stopping me for the speeding violation you just mentioned. May I know the specific speed your device recorded?" Meanwhile, Officer Jenkins walked around to the back of the car, pretending to check the taillights, then walked up to the front, looking inside the car through the windshield, deliberately creating an atmosphere of tension and pressure. Kowski shrugged, ignoring the question about speed. "Well, speed is only part of it. We also noticed that your windows were a little too dark for the law," he added, making up another excuse. "And frankly, a luxury car like this, driven by someone like you, alone at this hour on a deserted stretch of road, looks a little suspicious. We have reason to believe there may be unusual activity." Isabel realized the drama was happening. They were deliberately creating bogus violations to make things difficult. "Officer," she said, her voice starting to harden a little, "my windshield is fully state compliant, and I was on my way home from work. There was nothing out of the ordinary. Unless you have concrete evidence of any violations, I demand you return my papers." Isabel's firmness seemed to wear on Kowski's patience. He wasn't getting the frightened reaction he was hoping for. He decided to speed things up. "Look, Ms. Sterling," Kowski lowered his voice a little, leaning toward the window, trying to sound friendly. "I see you're a reasonable person. The process is complicated. If we make it too complicated, we might have to impound your car for further inspection, then you'd have to go to court, which would cost you time, money, and a record. It's a hassle, right?" He paused, looking Isabel straight in the eye, his gaze full of meaning. "Well, it's a nice day, and my co-workers and I are almost off duty. Maybe we can find a way to settle this here and make it easy. You help us a little, we help you a little, and pretend nothing happened. You know what I mean?" Kowski rubbed his thumb and index finger together, a gesture that could not have been more obvious about money. Jenkins stood nearby, pretending to look away, but clearly listening and waiting for the outcome. The brazenness of the blackmail proposal made Isabel shudder with disgust, but the anger inside her was tempered by a coldness that was frightening. She had seen too much corruption, too much abuse of power in her career, but to face it directly in this way still made her angry. She looked straight into Kowski's eyes, without a trace of fear, her voice now as hard as steel. "Officer Kowski, let me be clear. First, I have done nothing wrong. Second, I would never, under any circumstances, bribe a police officer. If you have legal evidence of any violations on my part, please issue a ticket in accordance with procedure. If not, I demand that you return my identification and vehicle registration immediately, and let me continue my journey." She paused, her eyes piercing Kowski. "And I warn you, your actions and words since you stopped me show all the signs of abuse of power, discrimination, and attempted extortion. You should consider your next move carefully." Isabel's blunt refusal, fearless attitude, and sharp warning were like a bucket of cold water on Kowski and Jenkins's profiteering plans and smug egos. They had completely misjudged this woman. Isabel Sterling's firm refusal and stern warning hit Officer Kowski's pride and simmering anger. His plan to make easy money went up in smoke, and worse, he was lectured and threatened by a black woman. His complacency turned into uncontrollable rage. The facade of professionalism was finally torn apart. "Oh, stubborn!" Kowski roared, his voice now full of spite and hostility. His face was red, veins standing out at his temples. "Who do you think you are, talking to me like that? A black woman driving a stolen car and still talking big?" Profanity, racially and sexist, began pouring out of Kowski's mouth. "You're arrogant! You think having a little money is cool? Someone like you must be a high-class prostitute or a drug dealer to be able to afford this car. Don't come here and lecture me!" Officer Jenkins, sensing his boss's anger, quickly joined in. He moved closer to the car door, his face showing aggression. "Listen to Officer Kowski. Stop bothering me." He could have slammed his fist on the roof of the luxurious Mercedes to make a loud, threatening noise. Isabel gripped the steering wheel, trying to control her boiling anger. She knew the situation was escalating dangerously, but she couldn't back down from this blatant injustice and abuse of power. "You are acting beyond the bounds of what a police officer should be doing," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "I demand that my attorney be called right now, and I want to speak directly to your commander." Kowski interpreted that legitimate and just request as a final act of defiance. He considered it an unacceptable insult. "Call a lawyer? Call the commander? You think you have the right to do that?" Kowski let out a savage laugh. He turned to Jenkins, his eyes commanding. "Arrest this woman for me, for resisting law enforcement, disturbing public order, and disobeying police orders. Search the car." He made up a series of baseless charges on the spot, determined to teach her a lesson. Jenkins, under Kowski's orders and also in a state of agitation, did not hesitate. He yanked open the driver's door. "Get out!" Now. Isabel knew that physical resistance would only make things worse and give them an excuse to use more force. She slowly got out of the car but continued to protest verbally. "You have no right to arrest me. This is completely illegal." But her words fell on deaf ears. Jenkins grabbed Isabel's arm, twisting it roughly behind her back. Isabel cried out in pain but held her ground. The cold metal clanged as Jenkins pulled the handcuffs from his belt and tightened them around her wrists. He squeezed hard enough that the metal cut into her flesh. Kowski stood with his arms crossed, watching the scene with a look of sadistic glee. "See? I told you. Being stubborn only gets you hurt." He continued to mumble insults, aimed at Isabel's skin color and appearance. After handcuffing Isabel, Jenkins pushed her mercilessly toward a nearby patrol car. He opened the back door, forced her head down, and shoved her into the hard, cramped seat. The door slammed shut with a heavy thud, trapping Isabel in the cramped space of the squad car. She sat there, back straight, eyes staring straight ahead through the mesh divider, her face expressionless except for a cold, unwavering stare. But inside, rage and determination swirled like a storm. She memorized every detail, Kowski and Jenkins's faces, the patrol car numbers, the time, the place, every word, every action. She knew the play was not over. The curtain call would come elsewhere, and she was certain that she would be the one to write the finale. The patrol car roared off down the deserted road, leaving the luxurious Mercedes S-Class parked alone in the fading sunset. On the way back to the station, Kowski and Jenkins continued to taunt and mock the woman in the back seat. They laughed and talked about the fat prey they had just captured, about how they would deal with her at the station. They were completely immersed in their complacency and ignorance, completely unaware that they were escorting one of the most powerful figures in federal law enforcement, and that hell was truly waiting for them. The patrol car pulled into the parking lot of the local police station, a two-story brick building that looked old and lifeless, tucked away in a remote corner of the town. Officers Kowski and Jenkins got out first, opened the back door, and dragged Isabel out, still with the same patronizing, rough manner as if she were a dangerous criminal. They escorted her through the musty hallway, straight to the check-in area and the duty desk. Behind the high counter, Sergeant Miller, a middle-aged man with graying hair and thick glasses, was scribbling notes. He looked up when Kowski and Jenkins entered with a handcuffed black woman. "What's this, Kowski?" Sergeant Miller asked, his voice even, as if he were used to taking arrests at the end of a shift. "Ah, big fish, Sarge," Kowski replied smugly, pushing Isabel toward the counter. "Resisting, disorderly conduct, failure to obey orders, suspicious driving, you name it." He placed Isabel's license and vehicle registration on the counter. "Let's get this bitch arrested." Jenkins stood beside him, arms crossed, smirking. Sergeant Miller picked up his papers, put on his glasses, and began the process of entering the information into the computer system. He glanced at the handcuffed woman, who stood straight and silent, her face cold and fearless, her eyes staring straight ahead, defiant. It was a little unusual for the detainees he usually saw. He read the name on the license. Isabel. Sterling ... The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't immediately place it. He started typing it into the system. As per standard procedure, Sergeant Miller looked up and asked Isabel a routine question to complete the initial profile. Occupation? It was the moment when all the arrogance and complacency of Kowski and Jenkins was about to crumble to dust. Isabel, still keeping her voice completely calm and clear, each word like a hammer blow, looked straight into the triumphant eyes of Kowski and Jenkins, and then answered Sergeant Miller's question. "Deputy Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation." A sudden deathly silence fell over the room. Sergeant Miller froze. The pen he was holding fell to the table with a dry clatter. His mouth fell open, his glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose. He stared at Isabel, then quickly back at the computer screen, then back at Isabel, his eyes wide with disbelief and beginning to flash with terror. Deputy Director of the FBI," he stammered, his voice shaking. He knew the position. It was one of the most powerful, second only to the director of the FBI. He understood immediately the disaster that had befallen this small police station. But Sergeant Miller's reaction was nothing compared to Kowski and Jenkins. The moment they heard the title Deputy Director of the FBI, the two policemen's world collapsed under their feet. Their faces changed in an instant, from red with smugness to pale, then paper white. The smirk on Jenkins's face froze and twisted. Both of their eyes widened, looking at Isabel as if they were seeing a ghost from hell. Cold sweat broke out, soaking the collars of their uniforms. They got it. They got it all in a split second. They hadn't just arrested a citizen. They'd insulted, handcuffed, tried to blackmail, and framed one of the heads of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They'd foolishly attacked a power so vast they could never have imagined. Career, gone, freedom, probably about to be gone. Kowski's knees went weak. He staggered, and almost simultaneously with Jenkins, they both dropped to their knees on the cold floor right there, in front of Isabel, in front of Sergeant Miller, and several other stunned officers in the station. Deputy Director Sterling ... Kowski raised his face covered in sweat and tears, his voice trembling, almost inaudible. Oh God. No. We didn't know. We honestly didn't know. Please forgive us. Jenkins was even more pathetic. He bowed his head to the floor, his shoulders shaking, and he sobbed. "I'm sorry. 1,000, 10,000 times sorry. It was just a stupid mistake. A terrible misunderstanding. We were so stupid. We have a family. Please give us a chance to live. Don't destroy us." The despicable, pitiful pleas of the two men who had been arrogant and brutal a moment before now echoed in the tense and fearful atmosphere of the police station. Isabel stood there, still handcuffed behind her back, but her cold, stern gaze did not waver. She looked at the two kneeling at her feet with undisguised contempt. She did not respond to their pleas. Instead, she turned to Sergeant Miller, who was still standing frozen behind the counter, her voice calm but filled with an irresistible command. "Sergeant, release my handcuffs. Then call your commander immediately. Also, notify the FBI City Field Office of this incident. Have them send agents here immediately. Is that clear?" Sergeant Miller jerked awake. Yes, Deputy Director." He hurriedly searched for the handcuff keys, his hands shaking as he unlocked Isabel. Then he immediately picked up the phone, his voice panicked as he reported the situation to his superiors and the FBI. The real storm was just beginning to hit this small police station. News that FBI Deputy Director Isabel Sterling had been illegally stopped, insulted, attempted to extort, and arrested by two local police officers sent shockwaves not only through the small police department, but also to the highest levels of city and federal command. The police chief, the mayor, and other high-ranking officials arrived at the station in record time, their faces showing signs of tension, shame, and extreme fear. Agents from the local FBI office, including the special agent in charge, quickly arrived on the scene and took over the situation. Apologies were poured out to Deputy Director Sterling, but she received them coldly and professionally. All she cared about was that justice be done. Officer Ray Kowski and Officer Mark Jenkins were immediately suspended without pay. They were stripped of their weapons and badges and placed in complete isolation. Interrogations began almost immediately, conducted in parallel by the police department's Internal Affairs Division, under close supervision of the FBI, and FBI special agents specializing in government corruption and civil rights violations. Faced with the initial evidence and intense pressure, both Kowski and Jenkins quickly broke down and confessed to much of their wrongdoing, though they attempted to blame each other or their circumstances. A massive joint investigation was launched, involving local police and the FBI. Every aspect of the case was scrutinized. Dash cam data, patrol logs, Deputy Chief Sterling's detailed testimony, evidence of fabricated traffic stops, attempted extortion, and false arrest charges. In particular, the work records of Kowski and Jenkins were meticulously reviewed. It was quickly discovered that Kowski had a questionable history of complaints of bullying and discrimination, though none had been severely punished. Jenkins, though younger, also had several records of using unnecessary force. With the victim being a high-ranking FBI official and the evidence of guilt so clear, the case quickly moved into the prosecution phase. Both the District Attorney's Office and the U.S. Department of Justice, through the U.S. Attorney's Office, got involved. Kowski and Jenkins faced a comprehensive indictment of serious criminal charges at both the state and federal levels, including federal civil rights violations, a very serious crime, conspiracy to extort money under color of law, unlawful detention, abuse of official position, false statements, and obstruction of justice. The Kowski and Jenkins trials became a national sensation. The evidence presented was irrefutable. The testimony of FBI Deputy Director Isabel Sterling, both as a victim and a top law enforcement expert, was particularly powerful. The defense attorney's efforts were largely a formality, focusing on pleading for leniency and blaming systemic failures or workloads, weak arguments against the evidence of intentional and malicious individual behavior. After the trial, it didn't take long for the jury to reach a verdict. Both Kowski and Jenkins were guilty on all major charges. The sentencing was a day of powerful justice. The federal judge presiding over the case delivered a scathing verdict, highlighting the betrayal of public trust, the dangers of racism and corruption in the police force, and the need for a sentence that would deter similar acts in the future. He noted that the actions of Kowski and Jenkins not only harmed individuals, but also undermined the foundation of the rule of law. The final verdict. Both Ray Kowski and Mark Jenkins were each sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. An extremely harsh sentence reflecting the combination of multiple serious crimes, including federal crimes with high penalties and the special status of the victims. The verdict was widely hailed by the public and civil rights groups as a major victory in the fight against police abuse and racial discrimination. The case became a case study that forced police departments across the country to review their training, supervision, and disciplinary practices. The police departments where Kowski and Jenkins worked underwent a major overhaul and faced increased scrutiny from federal agencies and the community. For FBI Deputy Director Isabel Sterling, the verdict brought a sense of justice, but also left her with a deep sadness about the state of society. The incident, though painful, only reinforced her determination to use her position and power to promote change, to fight for equality and integrity throughout the legal system. Her drive home that evening in the sunset served as a stark reminder, but also a powerful motivation to continue her mission. The final message resonated. No one, no matter what position, is above the law. Abuse of power and prejudice will be punished, and justice, though sometimes delayed, will always prevail. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.